The rain poured heavily that night, its relentless rhythm echoing to the dark alleys of the city. Amid the shadows, a thin girl in tattered clothes huddled beneath a broken umbrella. Her name was Amara. Life had been cruel to her, leaving her with no family, no home, and only scraps to survive. Yet, in her eyes, there still lived a spark of kindness that the world had not managed to extinguish. As she searched the streets for a dry place to rest, she noticed a figure collapse near the corner of a deserted park bench. At first, she hesitated. Many people on the streets feigned illness to lure the desperate, but something about this man was different. His breaths were shallow, his lips pale, and his trembling hands clutched at his chest. Amara dropped her broken umbrella and ran to him, shaking his shoulders gently. "Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered, fear and concern mixing in her fragile voice. The man barely opened his eyes, muttering incoherently. He was tall, dressed in a rain-soaked suit, but strangely, his shoes and watch suggested well far beyond the streets. Without thinking, Amara tore off her thin scarf, pressing it against his face to shield him from the cold rain. She tried to drag him toward an abandoned shop with a half-collapsed roof, using every ounce of her strength. Her hands trembled, her own body weak from hunger. Yet she refused to leave him. Through the night, she stayed beside him, wrapping her frail body around his shivering frame to share her warmth. She whispered small prayers, hoping he would survive until dawn. Finally, when the first rays of morning light pierced the gray sky, the man stirred. His eyes opened slowly, revealing a sharpness that did not match his fragile state. He blinked, confused, as he studied the girl sitting beside him, soaked and exhausted, but still keeping watch. "Why? Why did you help me?" he asked, his voice raspy, filled with both curiosity and disbelief. Amara smiled faintly, brushing her wet hair aside. "Because no one else would, and I couldn't just walk away." The man stared at her for a long moment, something unspoken flickering in his gaze. He sat up slowly, wincing from the pain in his chest, but his mind was already racing. Few in his world ever acted without expecting something in return. Yet this girl, homeless, starving, forgotten, had given everything she had for a stranger. He reached into his pocket with trembling fingers, but Amara stopped him. "Please don't. I don't want money. Just promise me you'll be all right." The man froze. No one had said such words to him in years. By afternoon, his strength returned, and with it, a startling revelation. This man was Elias Kane, a billionaire whose empire stretched across continents. Yet here he was, alive only because of the compassion of a girl who had nothing. Elias studied Amara as she tried to make herself small, embarrassed by her ragged clothes and muddy shoes. He suddenly stood tall, his voice carrying authority once more. "Come with me." Amara shook her head. "I don't belong in your world." "You don't understand," Elias said, his tone firm yet gentle. "From this day forward, your life will never be the same. You've saved me, and I don't let debts go unpaid." Amara's heart raced, torn between fear and hope. She didn't know whether to trust him, yet something in his eyes promised he wasn't speaking lightly. That evening, sleek black cars rolled into the alley. Bodyguards rushed out, stunned to find their powerful employer standing beside a ragged homeless girl. The entire scene looked like a miracle out of place. "Sir, we've been searching for you all night," one of them exclaimed, rushing forward. Elias raised a hand to silence them. His gaze remained fixed on Amara. "This girl," he said, pointing toward her, "is the reason I am alive. Treat her with the same respect you would treat me." The men exchanged bewildered looks, but none dared to question him. As Amara sat inside the luxurious car for the first time in her life, she clutched the torn scarf she had used to keep him alive. Everything around her felt like a dream, yet she couldn't shake the fear that it might shatter any moment. When they reached Elias's grand mansion, the glittering chandeliers and marble halls nearly blinded her. Servants rushed forward, confused at the sight of a girl who clearly didn't belong in such wealth. Murmurs spread quickly, but Elias's commanding presence silenced them all. He ordered a doctor, fresh clothes, and a feast laid out before Amara. She ate cautiously, unsure she would wake up starving in the cold again. Elias, however, watched her every movement, his mind already forming a plan that would not only change her life, but shake the very foundations of his empire. Because for the first time in decades, Elias Kane had found something money couldn't buy, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. That night, as Amara lay in a warm bed for the first time in years, she overheard a hushed conversation outside her door. Elias's voice was sharp. Find out everything about her. Who she is, where she came from, and why fate put her in my path. But what neither of them knew was that Amara's past held secrets even she wasn't aware of. Secrets that would intertwine their destinies in ways neither power nor wealth could control. The next morning, Amara awoke to the soft rustle of silk curtains and the faint aroma of freshly baked bread drifting through the room. For a moment, she lay still, blinking at the golden light pouring through tall windows. It was so different from the damp corners of the streets where she usually slept. The sheets beneath her felt too soft, too clean, and she feared that moving too quickly would cause all to vanish like a fragile dream. She sat up slowly, her hands running over the embroidered quilt, and then froze. A maid stood at the door, holding a tray of fruit and tea. The woman's eyes flickered with surprise at the sight of Amara's wide, cautious stare. Without a word, the maid set the tray on the bedside table and stepped back. "Mr. Kane has requested you join him in the East Garden when you are ready," she said politely, though Amara caught a hint of curiosity in her voice. Amara nodded silently. As the maid left, she touched her scarf, the only piece of her old life she still clung to, before glancing at the clothes laid out for her on a velvet chair. A pale blue dress, simple yet elegant, along with polished shoes that gleamed in the morning sun. She hesitated, but something inside her urged her to step into this strange new world. When she finally entered the East Garden, she found Elias seated beneath a sprawling oak tree. The garden itself was breathtaking. Fountains trickled softly, exotic flowers bloomed in precise patterns, and birds sang from gilded cages. Elias looked up from a folder of documents as Amara approached, his sharp eyes softening at the sight of her. "You clean up well," he remarked, his tone more amused than mocking. "Sit." She sat awkwardly across from him, her fingers gripping the folds of her dress. Elias studied her, his gaze lingering not on her clothes or appearance, but on the guarded expression she carried. "Do you know who I am?" he asked suddenly. Amara shook her head. "I only know you're important. And rich. More than anyone I've ever met." Elias leaned back, folding his arms. "That's one way to put it. My name is Elias Kane. People call me ruthless, powerful, dangerous, even. Yet, despite all that, I was helpless last night, and you saved me." Her cheeks flushed at his words, and she quickly looked away. Anyone would have done the same. "Not anyone," Elias countered firmly. "In fact, I can name a dozen people who would have walked past me without a glance. Even people I trusted with my life. But you didn't." He leaned forward, his voice lower now. "Tell me about yourself, Amara." She froze. The question cut deep, not because she didn't want to answer, but because she wasn't sure she truly knew. Memories of her childhood were blurred, shadows filled with hunger, loss, and endless wandering. She swallowed hard. "There isn't much to tell. I grew up nowhere, really. My parents died when I was young. I've been on my own since. The streets taught me how to survive." Elias tapped his fingers on the table, thoughtful. "And yet, despite that, you still have compassion. That is rare." For a moment, silence settled between them, broken only by the soft splash of the fountain. Then Elias spoke again, his tone sharper. "I had my men look into you." Amara's heart clenched. She gripped her scarf tightly. "Why?" "Because people don't just appear out of nowhere," Elias replied. "And you, there are gaps in your story. Gaps that even you don't seem to know about." Amara frowned, confusion spreading across her face. "What do you mean?" Elias slid a folder across the table. "This is what we found. You were registered at a foster home years ago, but disappeared without explanation. Records say your parents didn't die the way you think they did. There are mentions of something bigger, something someone wanted hidden." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder, scanning the faded documents. Photographs, reports, signatures, pieces of a past she had long buried. She felt her chest tighten, her mind spinning. "This can't be right," she whispered. Elias's gaze never wavered. "It's only the beginning. I believe there's more to you than even you realize." Before Mara could respond, a tall man in a dark suit approached swiftly. Elias's bodyguard leaned close, whispering something urgent into his ear. Elias's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. He stood abruptly. "We'll continue this later," he said, his tone clipped. Turning to Amara, he added, "Stay here. No matter what happens, don't leave the estate." Amara watched him stride away, her heart pounding. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. She glanced back at the folder, at the names and places that meant nothing to her, yet seemed to hold pieces of her identity. For the first time, she felt that her life on the streets was only a fragment of a much larger story. Hours passed, and those servants brought her food and tried to distract her with idle chatter. Amara could feel the tension in the air. The mansion seemed alive with whispers, movements too quick, and glances too sharp. She sensed danger circling, though no one dared explain. Finally, as the sun dipped low, Elias returned. His face was unreadable, but his eyes carried a storm. He dismissed everyone with a wave, leaving only Amara. "There are forces at work that you cannot yet understand," he said, his voice heavy. "People who would rather see you silenced than discover the truth of your past." Amara's breath caught. "Silenced? Why me? I'm no one." Elias shook his head slowly. "You're not no one. You are someone the world forgot, or was made to forget, and those who try to erase you, they will not stop now." Her pulse quickened, fear clawing at her chest. "What do you want from me?" Elias's eyes softened for the first time that day. "Not what I want. What you deserve. Safety. Answers. A life beyond hunger and fear. But you must trust me, Amara. Without trust, none of this will work." She studied him, searching for deception, but found none. Instead, she saw a man who, despite his wealth and power, seemed strangely vulnerable in that moment. "I don't know if I can trust anyone," she admitted quietly. "Then let me earn it," Elias replied. Before she could answer, a sudden crack echoed to the garden, like the snap of a branch, but sharper, colder. Elias's hand shot out, pulling her down just as a bullet shattered the stone pillar behind them. Amara screamed, her heart leaping into her throat, but Elias's grip was firm, protective. Within seconds, bodyguards swarmed, shielding them and shouting orders. The calm garden erupted into chaos. Elias held her close, his voice urgent but steady. "Now you see, Amara, whoever is after you has already made their move. You are not safe, not here, not anywhere, until we uncover the truth." Amara's mind raced, terror and confusion colliding inside her. The world she had known, the alleys, the hunger, the solitude, suddenly seemed safer than this new reality, where bullets flew and secrets threatened to consume her. But as she clung to Elias, trembling, a thought rooted itself deep within her. If people wanted her gone, then perhaps she was more important than she had ever believed. The night stretched long after the gunshot shattered the garden's peace. The mansion's once serene halls were now guarded like a fortress, bodyguards stationed at every door, helicopters circling overhead, and whispers of danger threading through the staff like wildfire. Amara sat in a dimly lit room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart still trembling from the sound of stones shattering inches from her head. She had lived among dangers before, hunger, cold, violence. But this was different. This was organized, calculated, relentless, and she could not understand why. Elias entered, his presence as commanding as the storm raging within him. He carried a glass of water and set it in front of her, his sharp eyes never leaving her face. She tried to steady her breathing, but the way of his gaze made her feel as though he could see into the very soul she had spent years guarding. "They want you gone," he said at last, his voice low and heavy. "And that means you are more important than you know." Amara looked up, her eyes wide with confusion. "But I'm just a girl from the streets. I don't even know who I really am." "That," Elias replied, "is exactly why they fear you." He sat across from her, leaning forward. "I had my men dig deeper into the records. Amara, your parents weren't ordinary people." Your father was once a trusted business partner of my own father. Together, they built the foundations of an empire. But greed destroyed everything. When your parents refused to be part of corruption, they were silenced, their names erased, their daughter lost in the chaos, her breath caught in her chest, disbelief clouding her mind. My parents, your family? You mean all this? Yes, Elias interrupted gently. Our paths were bound long before you pulled me from the rain. The people who came after me that night, they were not only after me, they were making sure you would never remember where you came from. But fate put us together, and now the truth is rising whether they like it or not. Amara pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. The life she thought was hers, of loneliness, hunger, and survival, suddenly seemed like a cruel disguise. Why didn't anyone protect me? Because the enemy was within, Elias said bitterly. Powerful men who saw you as a threat even as a child. They knew that if you survived, if you discovered who you truly were, everything they built on lies would crumble. Her head spun. A forgotten child of a broken empire. A girl who had grown up invisible, but carried blood that powerful men feared. She felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted entirely. Elias reached across the table, his hand firm on hers. Listen to me, Amara, you are not powerless. They tried to bury you in shadows, but here you are, alive, stronger than they ever expected. And now, together, we will face them. Tears filled her eyes, not weakness, but the overwhelming storm of truth breaking within her. For years, she had been nothing but a shadow in the alleys of the city. Now, she was a flame others wanted extinguished. Days passed, and the mansion became a fortress of strategy. Amara was no longer treated as a stray, rescued from the streets, but as someone central to Elias's every move. He taught her not only the language of power, but also how to carry herself in a world that had been kept from her. For the first time, she stood before mirrors in gowns that fit her, her posture tall, her gaze steady. The frightened girl with scarf and broken shoes was gone, replaced by a woman rediscovering her rightful place. But the threats grew louder. Anonymous messages, broken windows, poison slipped into food. Every warning clear. Step back or face ruin. Yet Elias never faltered, and Amara, though afraid, stood firm beside him. She realized her entire life had been training for this moment. Surviving hunger had given her endurance. Facing cruelty had given her courage. And saving Elias had given her purpose. One evening, Elias gathered his closest allies and revealed everything. The empire built on lies ends tonight, he declared, his voice echoing through the grand hall. At his side, Amara stood silently, her presence alone a living challenge to every falsehood that had once buried her existence. The plan was risky, dangerous, but necessary, a public revelation. Elias would expose the corruption, but only Amara's existence, her survival, would prove the final truth. They prepared for a gala, an event where the city's most powerful men and women would gather, unaware that their darkest secrets were about to burn beneath the light of truth. The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and diamonds, the air thick with arrogance and wealth. Powerful men whispered deals in corners. Women in gowns sparkled with pride, and music floated through the air. Yet beneath the beauty, tension simmered. Elias's enemies knew he was planning something. They simply didn't know what. When Elias stepped onto the stage, the crowd fell silent. He was a man used to commanding attention, but tonight, his eyes didn't just hold authority. They held fire. For years, he began, we have lived under the illusion of success. But behind the gold and glass lies betrayal, lies that destroyed families, and lies that nearly destroyed me. The crowd shifted uneasily. Murmurs spread, but none dared interrupt him. And tonight, Elias continued, his voice rising, those lies end, because the truth they tried to bury has returned. He extended his hand, and from the side of the stage, Amara stepped forward. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some froze in disbelief. Others exchanged frantic glances. The young woman, dressed in elegance but with eyes that burned with resilience, walked with the poise of someone who carried more than just beauty. She carried truth. This is Amara, Elias announced, the daughter of a man they betrayed, the child they erased. She lived when they wanted her gone. She rose when they wanted her broken. And now, she stands here, proof of their crimes. A man near the front shouted, his face pale. Lies! She is nothing but a street rat. Amara's voice rang clear across the hall, steady despite the pounding of her heart. I was that street rat. I slept in the cold, starved, begged, and was forgotten. But I survived. And now I know why. Because truth cannot be erased, no matter how deep you bury it. You fear me then, and you fear me now. Not because I am powerful, but because I am the living reminder of what you did. Her words struck the crowd like lightning. The hall erupted in shouts, gasps, accusations. Cameras flashed, journalists rushed forward, and security scrambled as the truth spread like wildfire. Elias's men unveiled the documents, the proof of corruption, the erased records of Amara's existence. The men who once ruled the city with shadows found themselves exposed under blinding light. Their empire crumbled, their names disgraced, their power shattered. Amara stood at the center of it all, not as a forgotten girl who once gave her last scarf to a stranger in the rain, but as a woman who carried the strength of survival and the dignity of truth. When the night ended and the hall emptied, Elias found her standing on the balcony, staring at the city below. Lights glittered like stars scattered across the earth. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small. You changed everything tonight, Elias said quietly, stepping beside her. Amara shook her head softly. No, I only showed them what they tried to hide. The rest was fate. Elias studied her, the girl who had once saved him without knowing who he was. He had seen power, wealth, betrayal, and ambition, but never had he seen such unshakable strength in someone who had nothing. Fate may have brought us together, he said, his voice filled with reverence, but it was your courage that saved us both. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening in the city lights. Maybe I was meant to be forgotten so that when I was found, the truth would be too powerful to deny. And in that moment, the girl who had once been invisible became unforgettable. The story of Amara, the homeless girl who saved a dying man, unaware he was a billionaire, and who uncovered the truth of her own lost legacy, will be told not as a tale of pity, but as a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Because sometimes the ones the world throws away are the very ones destined to change it forever.